What is that? It's a Nanchang CJ6, a Chinese airplane, and we are going to fly it today. We being me. I'm Michael, I'm going to be the passenger. And there's John. John's going to be the pilot. Say hello, John.
Hello, John.
John's from Kentucky. You have to bear with him. So, what kind of conditions have we got today? Well, it's a beautiful morning in Northern California. It's February. It's very quiet, still, cloudless sky. I don't see anyone up there because I wouldn't want to bump into anyone. I think all the other pilots are sleeping off their hangovers from their Super Bowl parties. So, let's check out this thing. What have we got here? Well, the Nanchang CJ6 has kind of a complicated story. There was a Russian plane in the Second World War called a Yak, and the Chinese decided to copy it. And I think the first copy was called a CJ5, and they decided after a while that they would develop it into a better model, and this is it, the CJ6. If you compare it to the Russian plane that was its forebear, you can see a number of changes that the Chinese made. It's got this handsome square tail as opposed to a round one. This kind of looks more like a P-51, whereas the Yak had a tail fin that looked more like, say, a Spitfire. And then what I think is cool is the Chinese have this nice wing which starts off kind of parallel to the ground and then kicks up. It's called a gull wing, that's what I'd call it, but John the pilot would call it dihedral, and it gives it kind of a nice look, I think. And let's check out the cockpit. This plane was built as a training plane, so it's got room for pilot and trainee, or in this case, pilot and passenger. And it's got a long cockpit. At the moment, both parts are open. And you can just see that whereas originally this plane had a little flat line along the top of the cockpit, there's this domed section which John added, which is better to accommodate tall and distinguished pilots like him, and at the moment it's slid back. Unfortunately, the passenger section does not have a dome.
The passenger seat is lower.
Okay, the passenger seat is lower, but I'm 6'4", so I have verified that I do fit in there, but it's a bit cramped, and there's no conveniences like somewhere to put your coffee or anything like that, no cup holders. But it's a good plane. Now, it looks like this was built in the 1940s, but it wasn't, because although its heritage goes back that far, the Chinese built this plane for something like 50 years. And this, John, you said this plane was actually constructed in 89?
1989.
Man, so it's 20 years old then?
Yeah.
Well, the roads are full of cars that are older than that. So this thing probably will get up in the air and stay there.
Hopefully.
Good.
That's a good thing.
So
right now I'm about to do a pre-flight on this, and then we'll go flying.
sounds cool.
So I have a checklist. I always use a checklist.
Good boy. Let's look at the front end here. Now you might well think that in order to fly this plane, you have to get a little step ladder and stand near the propeller here and crank it manually about 2,000 times, and in the process winding up a giant elastic band. But in fact, it does have a motor or an engine. Now, it's a piston engine, and usually pistons are arranged in a line, and they go up and down, kind of like a line of chorus girls with their legs out of sync.
You want me to open that so you can see the cylinder?
Sure. This engine is different. This engine has a radial arrangement of pistons, which is more like the slices in a pizza pie. And John's going to crank it open. Maybe we can see. Probably not enough light there. But the pistons, as I say, are arranged like slices of pizza. And as they go up and down, they have little rods that connect them to an eccentric crank, which converts it into a rotary motion, which turns the propeller or screw. So that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? So that's all I can tell you about the engine, except that it is air-cooled. One of the advantages of having a radial engine like this is that the pistons are all facing into the wind, and so they can be cooled by air, whereas if you have an inline engine, that may be okay for the first cylinder, but all the others are in its shadow, and they don't get the benefit of cooling, which means you then have to have water cooling.
Unless you have ducting that directs air around those.
That's right.
The typical
It's harder,
light
though.
aircraft engines like the Cessnas have are air-cooled.
Yeah.
They have fins or vanes on the cylinders, and they have baffling that redirects the air around those.
Yeah. Some outfits, like the notoriously conservative U.S. Navy, wouldn't go near anything with an inline engine. They wanted these radials. So the advantage, I suppose, of not having a cooling system by water is you're saving weight, no radiator, no water, and if you spring a leak, then you've got to go down, whereas with this plane, there's no leak to spring. Okay.
One thing you have to do with a radial engine is that when it sits for a while, the oil tends to pool. The oil that's left in the cylinders tends to pool in the bottom cylinders. And so you can't, if you try to start it when that happens, you'll try to compress that oil and it'll blow the top of the cylinder head off. So you don't want to do that. So we hand prop it, and just to circulate that oil out. And you need to turn it, in this case, what we call 6 blades. So I'm going to turn this, you'll see me doing this. And that's just to get the oil out of the bottom cylinders, so we don't have a mechanical problem. They call it a hydraulic lock, and that would be a terminal for the engine.
Okay.
So that's 3 blades.
Kind of looks like you're trying to start it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that was 6. Right?
So, with that precaution taken, we should probably enjoy a relatively crash-free flight.
Well,
I'm looking forward to that.
We would enjoy the flight. If we had a problem with that, then we wouldn't get off the ground.
Okay, well, I'm going to switch this off and then go and have a look at the cockpit.